Hi everybody, I'm Lise Colyer, a co-founder of Quota and the lead author of our UN proposal for an Omnilabel headed by Professor Tim Lang. Just by way of setting the scene, the United Nations is putting food systems on the international radar with its first Food Systems Summit this year. So I welcome you all to this, our UN affiliated event ahead of the Food Systems Summit, designed to inform the decisions the UN will take. This is our chance to put proper labeling on the agenda. We have a perfect blend in the audience. Most of you coming from a business background, which is fantastic, the food business, but we also have office holders from the Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Food Programme, other UN bodies that could help to implement this proposal. And we have outstanding researchers from a range of highly respected universities immersed in addressing sustainability, nutrition, and agriculture. Quota, as a B2B news and event site for food professionals, is generally agnostic in reporting the news. We're taking a position on this because we found ourselves reporting on the fragmented groups advocating for it over and over and over again. And the Food Systems Summit seemed like the perfect opportunity to bring the fragmented business, policy, and research efforts together. The Food Systems Summit is looking for game-changing solutions, and this, we believe, will transform the food system quickly and dramatically. There's always a lot of empty rhetoric at events such as this, posturing and doublespeak, but our proposal comes straight out of the real world with a view to changing the real world. We're very, very happy to welcome Professor Tim Lang, who's been advocating for many years for proper food labeling. Terrence Collingsworth he's steeped in labor rights, particularly for children, and the difference it would make if consumers knew when their food was produced by child slaves, for example. Terry was also involved in developing a monitoring system called Rugmark, which has a new name, which we believe would be the basis for independent monitoring of food metrics. And we have Anya Doherty, who is already providing food businesses with carbon footprint labels. Not only that, she's part of a Cambridge research team, which has demonstrated the positive environmental impact of informed consumers. When they know which foods to choose, they choose the ones that do the least damage. And now over to my co-founder, Gavin Wren.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this UN pre-summit event. I'd like to welcome you all. It's such an important initiative. It's so exciting, this. It's got such capacity to empower citizens and also to provide accountability for businesses too. So we're very pleased you could join us here. We're also streaming live on TikTok and Facebook as well. So hopefully we're going to get to a really big audience today to hear this message. While you're watching, if you're able to tweet or post on Instagram, use the hashtag Omnilabel and tag us. That's at Global Quota. That would be amazing. If you have any questions at all, if you put them in the Q&A at the bottom, and if you use the chat for chat, networking, drop your contact details, whatever, we encourage you to have a good natter there. So I'm going to put some links into the chat as well, relating to our proposal and the details of it, so you can catch up on those later. So to start with, I'm going to hand over to Professor Tim Lang. Now, Tim is spearheading the Omnilabel initiative, and he's an Emeritus Professor of Food Policy at City University of London, after originally founding the centre in 1994. His long and illustrious career started in hill farming and has seen him work at highest levels around the globe, including consultants to the World Health Organization, FAO, UNEP, the list goes on, special advisor to the House of Commons Select Committee, and has worked in many areas around the globe, including the Eat Lancet report as well. He's co-written and written many books, articles, chapters, and his most recent book, Feeding Britain, was extremely popular and relevant in the times of Brexit. On top of that, Tim's also a lovely guy, and he's been making the case for Omnilabel for many years. And now that the stars have aligned, it's time to act. So with that, I'll hand over to Tim. Over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Gavin. Can you see my screen? You can, nodding. Okay, my job is really just to kickstart, what do we mean by Omnilabel? Terrence is going to talk about, you know, the rug mark as an example, a very, very good one. I'm going to be arguing that what we've got is this. We've got what I call elsewhere with colleagues policy cacophony. You've got consumers barraged by hundreds of logos. On the right are just a selection I got in and around mostly food. Label behind the label isn't there. It doesn't really feature in food products. It should do for the reasons we're saying. On the left hand of the screen, from the excellent Ethical Consumer Research Association, there are just the logos they say to their readers and subscribers, you know, go for these best buy brands. But look at how many there are. There's, you know, you drown. Which are the ones that you trade on, or what matters? This is, you know, policy cacophony. The truth is, on food information coming to consumers, some of this information is mandatory, some is partial, some is just appeals like these logos we've looked, and some is not there, which it should be there. Mandatory in Europe, most rich Western countries, and indeed many countries, you get mandatory ingredients. In the EU, we have a format called QUID. I spent many years of my life being one of the many people arguing for this quantitative ingredients declaration. So that means when you look in the tiny print on a label, on a packaging, the biggest comes first. That took about 20 years to get. It took about 25 years to get health and nutrition labeling. In forms that very often consumers don't understand it, but nonetheless it's been useful because it gets companies to declare what they're doing. We're still not getting proper allergy labeling. We get quite good packaging labeling, but translating it into delivery, altogether a different matter. We get this massive logo appeal, which is heavily environment and animal welfare, and some of it franchised and commercial. We don't know how to discriminate between those. But when it comes to the big environmental issues, carbon footprinting, water footprinting, biodiversity, it's not on the label. And we don't get social conditions, which both Anya and Terrence will talk about. You can't understand food unless you understand the social conditions. So by arguing for an Omnilabel, I'm saying, is there any way that we could get all of this information in one system so you make order out of the cacophony? What consumers need is this. They need clarity, they need it graded. You know, when you buy an electrical goods in the European Union, you get it from A to G, and immediately everyone ratcheted up the quality of their products. So you've got AA, and so on. We've gone for traffic lights, red, green, amber, a lot of food and nutrition labeling, or grading 1 to 5 in the Nutri-Score system, but some system of grading. It's got to be evidence-based. It's got to be one system so everyone knows it. The Scandinavians, Sweden set up its keyhole system, which was one of the little logos I put in earlier. And it got very high trust because they understood it and realized if something had keyhole in it, it was passing what the Health Protection Agency thought was okay for food quality and health. It's got to be trusted, and it's got to be not just Britain or Botswana, it's got to be international and national. So this is complicated in policy terms. Now, over in the top right, there are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, passed 6 years ago. Even my country, Brexit land, agreed with that. 17 goals. Actually, that's too complicated to get onto a label. So when I was a government commissioner in Britain, we were arguing in the late 2000s for an Omnilabel, and we distilled it down to 6 headings. You can look at this later. These are the ones that basically matter. The social values, the labor quality, the slavery labor, for example, comes both under the economy and social values and under governance. You can distill most of what matters into food under those 6 headings. A different version of my model I put in there is on the left. People began to use that. But actually what mostly happens is on the right-hand side of this. This is from the biggest conservation organization in the world, WWF, which now sees sustainable diets, getting everyone to be both healthy and good for the environment and good for this, that, and the other. They start now giving dietary advice. So you've got a conservation organization say, let's have dietary advice. But where is the medium which gives the consumer the information to translate that? It's not there. Why do we need an Omnilabel of some form or other? I think 3 reasons. Firstly, this is a very good moment. Here we are in a pre-food systems summit. We've got the COP26 UN framework on climate change at the end of October. We've got the Convention on Biodiversity, and it's very hard to work out what's good or bad for biodiversity in food products. Meeting in China in October. We're dealing with post-COVID world where there's lots of tracking of the SDGs. There's a bit of oomph behind thinking about, well, how can we help consumers? It's a good policy moment. The second reason is that industry is all over the place, with great respect. The 21st century food challenge is not to sell more stuff, but better stuff, and very often less stuff. Clarity about the characteristics, to reconnect production with consumption, and to declare what's actually in the food, and then to get the picture of total diet. It's got to be about the process. How was this food made? Not just the product, me, or brand. In other words, total dietary impact requires this complicated but simplified version of Omnilabels. And the third reason this is a good time is because this actually unites civil society. There's a lot of argument going on about the Food Systems Summit at the moment. There are people withdrawing from it. And I think I can understand why, but also not understand. We've got to actually get beyond the sectionalism of ending policy cacophony, of just saying my interest is what matters. There's the collectivity that matters, clear demands, and that's what we haven't got. 15 years ago, we started experimenting. Would it be possible to get this? You could get a group which was all about, an aspect of this label, which was on a food product could be not so good on greenhouse gases, terrible on embedded water, very good on fair trade, very good on packaging and waste, not so good on animal welfare. You can get that sort of picture by having an Omni-level position. And that's what consumers want. And the reason this matters, in some respects, gets to the heart of what do we mean by capitalism. The argument is that market economics efficiency works by information flows to consumers, but that isn't what we have. So actually making a demand for this is calling the bluff of companies who say we're all about efficiency. It writes the imbalance of power between consumers and producers. Producers know what goes into their food. A factory manufacturer knows about the process. But if it's not declared, how on earth consumers be sovereign, which is what the theory says they are. It's about democracy of information, and it's about this critical issue of getting diet change. Gavin, in his introduction of me, referred to the Lancet Commission. This is one of many, many academic and scientific overviews which say we cannot go on eating as the rich West world is doing without causing major, major damage to the food ecosystems and health and social justice. So the hidden processes are very important to get out. So this is about connecting consumption with improving of supply systems. I put some references here if you want to go back to the 2007, 8, 9, 10 era when this began to emerge and then went down. That's what happens in the policy world. Ideas come forward, they go back, then they come forward. This is a good time for Omnilabels. The political steps that need to happen now are these 4. Governance. How would this be managed? Will the Scandinavians, the Nordics, pick up and experiment with this? What sort of multidisciplinary collaboration would be needed to produce the information for Omni standards? We've actually got it now. We didn't 15 years ago. The information is fantastic now, but we haven't done the design experimentation, the graphics, the using of QR codes, the apps. All of the technology is available now in a much better, more democratic way to test public acceptability. So I think the priority, my plea to take Omnilabels seriously is to discuss it in and outside the UN Food System Summit, to experiment, but above all, to build a common approach. Those of us who are deeply committed to improving the social dynamics of the food system must connect that with the environment and with health and with basically apparently very boring issues, but very important in terms of consumer rights, what's in the food, the ingredients, and those sort of process and product information. You ultimately have to have an Omnilabel system or allow information to become a source of distortions. So there are arguments against an Omnilabel. It's too complicated. The technology confounds it. The data isn't there. That was argued in the late 2000s, although there was no support. All of those, I think, are no longer true. They don't fit anymore. And the danger is, as I put in red at the bottom, that the sort of companies are going into Omnilabels. They're doing carbon footprinting. They're doing embedded water analysis. They're looking at the impact on biodiversity. They're looking at the labor issues and whether slave labor is there, but they're not sharing that with us. That's the critical issue. So demand it. We have to demand it. But I repeat, on the intervention ladder for what is really effective, arguing for a label is just one step up the famous Nuffield ladder of intervention. It's a lot better than doing nothing, but we've got to then take it a lot further. So my case is actually one of enthusiasm for Omnilabels. I think something like this has to emerge. The issue is how and who can do it. That's the way policy changes. Okay, over to you, Gavin. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you, Tim. Incredible and compelling argument for why now is the time to make this happen. And for everyone in the audience, we're going to share all of Tim's slides afterwards. So if you missed anything on there, they'll all be sent by email after the event. Anyway, I'll hand over to Lise now, who's going to talk a bit more about our proposal.
Yes, I mean, I think that it's been so well covered there. This is really just to sort of provide the slightly more quote-ish element of things. And I'm just going to open by quoting Professor Joachim von Braun, who heads the scientific group for the UN Food System Summit. And he said, there is no other area where the human rights of so many people are violated as in the food system. And consumers want no part of this. They want to know what choices they have. So anyone who reads Quota knows how compelling the statistics are. They're out there, they've been out there for some time. Food production creates 30% of greenhouse gas emissions. We know that antibiotic use in cows is making humans resistant to medicines. Destroying biodiversity to produce food is leading to more zoonotic diseases. So not just COVID, but SARS, Ebola, AIDS. Now, Terrence is going to tell us more about how rife modern day slavery is in food production. So I'll hand over there. But of the many and persistent outrages committed in the food system against indigenous people, just one example is that groups from the Brazilian and Colombian Amazon are suing retail giant Groupe Casino in France for selling beef linked to deforestation and land theft. So it's the first time a supermarket chain has been taken to court under a new French due diligence law, was adopted in 2017. We know that 60% of the economy is driven by the billions of consumer decisions that we make every day. We know that greenwashing is rife. And as I said, we're going to hear from Terry about how corporate self-monitoring is failing. We're currently being proactively disarmed of our power to drive change. Where consumers go, business will follow to improve their practices. Right now, investment in sustainable and responsible funds is going through the roof. It's doing nothing but going up, and this trend is only going to continue. Businesses know that to keep their investors and their customers happy, they need to demonstrate their ethical credentials. Prince Charles alone is behind a fund that's going to invest 10 billion in natural capital projects like regenerative agriculture by next year. Omnilabel metrics need to be rigorous, global, and independent. And this is where we say that the UN comes in. The UN leadership is essential. So I know in the chat and afterwards, Gavin's going to publish our Omnilabel metrics. So you'll see kind of what we're talking about here. The point that we're making with these metrics is that an Omnilabel, from a quota perspective, can rate food against 5 key impacts. Firstly, environmental damage across biodiversity loss, water scarcity, greenhouse gas emissions. This is where we can see where the meat was raised on greenhouse gas limiting feed, for example, or raised on pasture, which sequesters carbon. Food safety, and this is where crop and animal welfare comes in. It allows consumers to check for chlorinated chicken, hormone and antibiotic injections. You can check for GMOs and pesticides. You can check water pollution levels when you're buying fish. Labor rights, self-explanatory. Tech today allows for data capture from the farmer, which the consumer can read directly via a QR code. So if a consumer wants to tip a farmer, the tech is available for doing so direct to them. This creates personal relationships that brands can nurture rather than stifle. It's great for brands, it's great for consumers, and it steers us away from greenwashing. And land sovereignty. Our Omnilabel creates a forum inviting Indigenous peoples to influence business and policy decisions so that they can get involved in rating how pollution in the developed world is damaging their food systems and how theft of their land is delivering food to the developed world. Consumers do not want to buy the hamburger that was produced by stealing land and deforesting the Amazon. Now, we all think we know about nutrition labeling, but there is so much more that can be done, as Tim's touched on, as obesity skyrockets. So we've mapped those 5 metrics against all 17 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. As Tim said, those goals are a UN roadmap for delivering well-being to every citizen on the planet by 2030. Again, we're going to add a link, so there's a little bit more background there about SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals. The role of food in helping deliver Sustainable Development Goals has been largely overlooked. So our Omnilabel harnesses the food system. It puts the food business to work in delivering those really, really important goals. There are too many of them for us to run through at this event. Again, we're sharing the documents and we can email more on that to you later. And I think I was within my 5 minutes just.
Amazing, thank you, Lise.
Great.
Absolutely brilliant.
Didn't have to cut me off.
And yeah, and again, so many reasons why there's almost no reason not to do this. But on to our next speaker now, Terrence Collingsworth from IR Advocates, who has done a lot of work within the cocoa supply chain for human rights and against child slavery. Over to you, Terrence.
Thank you, Gavin, and thank you, Lise, for organizing this. Yes, in my brief time, I want to talk about an example of a positive labeling initiative and what are the factors in that. But I have to begin by setting the context of why we need it. And I'm focusing on the cocoa sector because I personally have been chasing Nestle, Cargill, Barry Callebaut, and the other huge cocoa companies since the late 1990s to try to get them to stop using child slaves to harvest their cocoa in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. And so full disclosure, I'm not a disinterested party. I have filed 4 different lawsuits against big cocoa based on the fact that they're continuing to use enslaved children. And the reason that there's a good legal claim and the reason why I'm particularly outraged about the cocoa sector is that in 2001, after we did a bunch of research and came back with the proof showing truly horrible conditions, trafficked children, enslaved children, harvesting cocoa for these giant corporations, our Congress passed a law that prohibited the importation of cocoa that the companies could not demonstrate was not harvested by child slaves. The industry quickly mobilized, hired a bunch of really fancy, expensive lobbyists, and they managed in our Senate to convert that to the Harkin-Engel Protocol, which is a voluntary initiative in which the companies all signed and promised in 2001 that don't worry, trust us, we're going to stop using child slaves. And what they've done in the intervening 20 years is given themselves 4 extensions of time. And now they've set their own goal that by the year 2025, they will reduce by 70% their use of child labor. I'm not making that up. Look on the internet for Harkin-Engel and look at the World Cocoa Foundation's press releases on it. So that's what happens when you let corporations self-monitor. They continue to profit from whatever they're doing that is either harming the environment or human rights. You can't let the fox guard the chicken coop. You have to have independent, verifiable, transparent monitoring systems. So during those 20 years of not stopping child labor, what the companies have done is they've created different programs, the Nestle Cocoa Promise. They're trying to create the impression in consumers' minds that they are doing something, or they're simply trying to confuse consumers. As Tim pointed out, multiple labels are out there already. They've added a few more. They also use Fair Trade and Rainforest Alliance labeling, which has nothing whatever to do with whether they're using child labor, but many people think it does. So it really emphasizes why you need clear labeling and what it stands for. So as of today, well, actually as of October 2020, a few months ago, all of this talk by the cocoa sector of their promise to stop using child slavery, the US Department of Labor funded a study by NORC at the University of Chicago that concluded that child slavery has gotten worse. They use the word child labor, but it's child slavery, and concluded there's 1.56 million kids doing harvesting of cocoa today in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. That is a travesty that after 20 years, that's where we are. So what we're advocating for, and the reason we filed lawsuits, is to drive the companies into doing something. They've spent millions of dollars on lawyers, lobbyists, PR firms to be able to continue doing this. And we're challenging them to actually do something instead, do something real. So I had the pleasure of working with Nobel Peace Laureate Kailash Satyarthi in India and then throughout South Asia in setting up a program called Rugmark, which is now called Good Weave. And you can look at goodweave.org to learn more about it. But the essential notions that we established in this program were that you cannot have any kind of monitoring that is not completely independent. So the elements of Good Weave are, we set up an independent, created a whole new board of experts that are in charge of the monitoring process. They decide. And now we have independent surprise inspections of the monitoring targets. We then require that we create rehabilitation and education programs for the enslaved children that we find. And the reward for this in the Rugmark/Good Weave system is that they get a label. And if the Good Weave label is promoted, if you go into high-end department stores, you'll see it. But the companies eventually grasped that the solution was going to help their business, that they got to distinguish their good carpets from the carpets that were actually woven by slaves. And the program proved highly successful. And I think that in closing, I just want to point out that this was the toughest monitoring program I think you could create, because we had to get armies of people on motorcycles to travel all over India to inspect the looms where the carpets were being weaved. But with the cocoa sector or many other agricultural sectors, it is a finite geographic area that we'd be sending inspectors into to be able to ensure that the products are not harvested in violation of whatever rules we've agreed to, in this case, no child slavery. So I'll stop there, and I encourage you to look at goodweave.org as an example of a true independent monitoring system that works, and I think it's transferable to almost any other sector. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Terry. And another reason why when we need these things to happen, they can. Everything we need is there. It's the motivation and the initiative that's needed. So with that, we'll hand over to Anya Doherty from Food Steps. She's a founder and CEO, and she's going to talk about data, tech, and the positive impact of food labeling. Over to you, Anya.
Thank you very much. Let me just start sharing my screen. Wonderful, yeah, so thank you very much, Terry and Tim, for giving that fantastic overview. In the next 5 minutes, I'll be talking more on the environmental labelling of food, but as a kind of pre-warning, we're fully in support of the Omnilabel and including the all-important social and nutritional aspects as well. But hopefully this can give some insights from research and industry specifically on the environmental side. So as a quick intro, my background is in food sustainability science at the University of Cambridge, where I did my undergrad and postgrad research. And while I was there, I worked with the university to measure the impact of their food on the environment, and also conducted one of the largest studies done to date into carbon labelling of food and the effects that that has on consumer choices. About 2.5 years ago, I then set up Food Steps to work directly with food businesses to measure and reduce their impact on the environment. And yeah, so hopefully in the next 5 minutes, I'll be able to share a little bit from both of those two streams of my work. So starting with the industry side of things, the key headline which I'd like to put forward today is that we've really found that the industry is ready for environmental labelling, and there's a lot of push at the moment from a wide range of food businesses to do this. So we've taken an experimental approach. We've been working with a wide range of different organisations, from universities to food manufacturers, to really test out the technology and show that it's possible to calculate the carbon footprint of products and also to get consumer engagement on that. So like Tim said, I think one of the big things which is on offer at the moment is something like a QR code, and we're in the process of understanding how useful those are to consumers, how many scans do we get, how are consumers actually engaging with those, and how is it affecting the choices that they end up making. And at the bottom, as I said, I think the key thing is that this is really, there's a lot of interest across a wide range of groups, whether that's institutions, so some of our best known institutions in the UK, like UCL and LSE, through to industry like Emirates, as well as quite pioneering food brands like Gusto, who are ready to adopt environmental labelling. And I think since they're ready to adopt environmental labelling, this is a great time to also put forward that they should be adopting other things as well, like an Omnilabel. And the final point I'd like to make on this slide from our work in industry is that we really see one of the big risks here of having lots of different labels as the risk of undercutting. So as soon as one company comes out and says, this is a carbon label, and then there's sort of 5 other carbon label options, well, if you're a food business, it's really appealing to go with the option which actually gives you the lowest carbon footprint score, and that which potentially doesn't include lots of different measurements. So even though we've kind of gone out and have tried pioneering one label, we definitely support having a unified and rigorous standard that all companies need to adopt, because there really is that risk of undercutting when you've got lots of different labels out there. And then second thing that I'd like to talk about is some of the research work that I did at Cambridge, and potentially the most interesting question is, does environmental labelling actually work? So what does it mean to actually put labels onto food, and does that affect consumer choices? So last year, while I was at Cambridge, I conducted the largest field experiment done to date into carbon labelling. We looked at real choices instead of hypothetical choices. So we actually put carbon labels into the cafeterias in Cambridge. We were able to test over 85,000 individual meal choices to see the outcome on carbon footprint. So our outcomes would really support, I think, what Tim was saying at the beginning, which is that having this does make an impact. We did see that the labels reduce the carbon footprint of food by 5%, but it is modest, so it's not going to be a silver bullet to all of our environmental and food system woes. But there are other benefits that come with that. So one of the things which we found really interesting was how having the labels really sparked a wider conversation, not just amongst the students and the university population, but also the chefs and the suppliers. So as soon as you start to say, well, this item is red labeled or high impact, suddenly you start to get chefs and meal developers saying, well, actually, we don't want to serve food that's red labeled. How can we make a difference to change that? So this was a short study. It was only about 6 weeks long because we got cut short by COVID. But I think hopefully it's a exciting and positive start that shows that these type of interventions do have a small but tangible outcome, but also potentially more exciting wider impacts around the engagement across the food supply chain. To sort of wrap things up, I think my experience over the last couple of years would really say that You know, the technology is available. We spent the last year and a half building a platform, a software platform to allow food businesses to calculate their environmental impacts much more quickly. And it's time that we put that research and science and software and technology to, you know, the best of our abilities. And, you know, as has been said before, really seize the moment of this interest and, you know, opportunity that we have to make a big difference. So thanks very much.
Amazing, thank you, Anya. And again, the idea that this technology, everything we need is there. We just need to mobilize everything and join those dots up, which is always the big thing in food systems. So we've got just under 15 minutes left. So what we'll do, we'll go to the audience. There's a few people who've got some things they want to say as well. So if I go to Alberto Saavedra, if you're there, I'll allow you to talk, and you can, you should be there now. If you would like to say something, if you've got a comment to make.
Sure, can you hear me?
Yeah. Good.
Very good. The idea that informed consumers can make a difference is something that has been clearly established. The technology is definitely there. It's been there for quite a while, actually. About 5-6 years ago, I was CEO of a company that was going to introduce a sort of a Omnilabel where a consumer could scan a barcode and get the sustainability information about the product, including social impact, environmental impact, and so on. Other people were trying to do the same thing. But we came up with a strategy to obtain the information that could be delivered to consumers in a transparent way, and in an effective way. And we filed a patent. It's a long story, but for health reasons, it didn't work out. I had some health reasons that prevented me from getting the venture capital that I needed. But anyway, this idea is what we call the information cooperative. In other words, you have for-profit corporations and you have nonprofit organizations, but in between you have cooperatives. And there's a way to establish a cooperative so that people that do deliver the information that is in turn delivered to the consumers are compensated for the information that they deliver. So I'd be very glad to share all that information and all the effort that we put into the app that we didn't launch for health reasons. So we'll definitely like to be in touch.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. That'd be really useful. We can share that with the audience as well after the detail after the event. So, and moving on, I've got Malango Mugogo, who I believe you would like to make a comment. If I just allow you to talk there. Are you there?
Yes, I am. I wasn't expecting to make a comment though, except to say thank you very much. So yeah, really great information. I work in the financial sector, and labeling is obviously really important. So banks don't have time to or the capacity to ascertain which is the most sustainable route to take. So labeling would also help on that level. I just wanted to say, on a personal level, I use the Environmental Working Group app when looking for consumer products, and an app called INCI, I-N-C-I, for consumer products, and I find it really useful. It's you scan a barcode and it gives you a set of information, like a traffic light system almost. Yeah, that was my only comment and input. Thanks.
Amazing, thank you for that. Really, really useful. And yeah, more proof that we've got everything we need. And just one more person as well, who these guys are doing work in Latin America around farmers and traceability. Juan and Carl, let me see if are you there? Juan and Carl?
Yep. Hi, everyone.
Hi there.
Hi, Gavin.
Hey, how are you? Have you got a comment? Would you like to contribute?
Well, I find the work you all do very interesting, very much aligned. Also reached out to Anya this morning, so I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you in the backstage. But no comments at the moment. Carl's also around here. I'm gonna share some links also that are useful, so you can follow up on our work on the chat. All right. Thanks. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you.
So what we'll quickly do, we'll jump on. There have been lots of other questions, and one of the first ones that came up is how do we deal with lobbies when it comes to a initiative like this? In the context of Peru, the question was, they sort of effectively make their own laws. So how do we deal with such a big force as that? If anyone, Tim or Terry, would like to comment on that.
Yeah, I'll comment. The short answer is by having alliances. The only way you get simplicity and sanity and clarity, which is what we're talking about here, is if you have a unified voice. If you're divided and all arguing for your little bit of the jigsaw, you get divided. And that's the most important thing. The second thing is to face to the public. Which is why labeling is a very important, a very powerful argument, even if it's a weak or relatively weak intervention system mechanism as a policy mechanism. It's relatively weak. Even if that's so, it's a good unifier. It holds to account the argument that is always said that market economics are very efficient. They're actually not. They're very wasteful. But nonetheless, there are efficiencies within it too. And so the unified lobby and being clear and taking it to the public, say, for example, just in Britain, there's a very big consumer organization now called Which, the Consumers Association, many millions of members. And that held a series of meetings across the UK a few years ago, sort of citizens jury approach, lasting 3 days in particular cities and then moved to another city. And what came out time and time again was that people didn't realize what they didn't know. And that is one of the powerful arguments about arguing for labeling, because even if it's a weak intervention method, it's a very powerful intellectual method of just saying, did you really know that you didn't know that there was slavery involved in picking your grapes? You think it's all lovely nutrients, but if you didn't know the slavery involved, you now do. And that is very powerful over things like bananas, and fruit picking, and the use of migrant labor on the social criteria within an Omnilabel, Gavin. That becomes very, very powerful indeed. So while I heard Anya saying, behavior change may be 5–10%, some studies show a bit more than that. The intellectual power is very great indeed.
Yeah.
Terry, I don't know what you think.
And just quickly build on that as well, Terry. And another question we've had, which is also how do you maintain independence? I don't know if that's something that would into too.
Well, I did want to quickly comment on the lobbying question that we got completely just kneecapped by the chocolate lobby when we first passed the prohibition on cocoa made with child slavery, that it is just a despicably powerful force in politics everywhere. And sunshine is usually the only way you can cure that, and that is to expose it when it happens and hope that somebody will care. I did put into the chat that, the unique thing about funding Good Weave, first of all, the primary principle has to be you are independent from the people you are monitoring, that they don't have the authority to say, don't do this or don't do that. So there's an independent board. Now, the companies do have to pay fees, though, that they're getting a tremendous benefit. They're getting monitoring that is credible, that they can point to and say that this is, you can be sure our product wasn't made with child slaves because it has the Good Weave label on it. So there's a very small sort of tax that is based on a percentage of your export value for the monitoring services. And then the importers pay a very small tax as well. And those funds are dedicated to the education and rehabilitation programs that are really the essential magic of good weed, that they're not just exposing child slavery or forced child labor, they're helping the children once they are discovered in the monitoring process. But just again, there are other ways to do it, of course, but you cannot cede your independence from the industry that you're monitoring.
Mm-hmm. One more question. We've literally got a few minutes. Anya, I was wondering if you had any thoughts about this. There was a question about what businesses need to do to get behind Omnilabelling. And I understand you've worked with your initiative with businesses. If you had any ideas about what businesses could do to support this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. You know, I think one of the things which we found quite interesting in working with businesses is, you know, often there can be individuals within a company who are very keen on this, and then it can get lost sometimes within the noise of a big, you know, business where there's lots of different stakeholders and they have to take it to management and then the board, and it all suddenly starts to seem, you know, too complicated. So, you know, there are some great initiatives out there to already get, you know, various other labels, but I think probably the key point from this conversation is that, you know, there's a reason why we've come to, you know, the UN Food Summit here, which is that this has to be something which is, you know, done more holistically and on a bigger scale than just kind of individual, you know, companies taking the charge. I think that's great, and those places can pave the way and they can put pressure on other places, but I think it is time for, you know, a single holistic system to come out of this. So, you know, hopefully we can get it back in contact with, you know, Quota and yourselves after, and, you know, really put together a kind of united charge to make this happen.
Amazing. I think that's a fantastic final statement to wrap up. We've got 2 minutes left. Lise, anything else you'd like to add?
No, thanks. I think it's absolutely wonderful to have as many participants as we have, and we're so grateful to see. I can see in the chat there's just so much support for this idea. It's really reassuring to all of us on this panel, isn't it, Gavin, to sort of to sort of come across the validation that, you know, as a consumer, we all go to the supermarket, we all ask ourselves, why don't I know this? We actually know that access to this information is in itself a human right. I mean, the breaking of our human rights on this is so fundamental. I keep saying the words human rights, which is our way of saying UN, you need to get involved in this. But it's absolutely wonderful to see that we have an audience here made up largely of people who do not normally relate in multilateral circles, who absolutely understand the pragmatic need here for something just like this. So we'll stay in touch with everybody who's registered, and let's hope that the UN decides to take this forward to the actual Food Systems Summit.
And I've put some email addresses in the chat. If there's anybody in the audience who really wants to help push this forward, who has any way that they can help in that matter, just get in touch with us and let us know. We'll have a chat, we'll have a conversation. So with that, I'd like to say a massive thank you to our panelists, to Tim Lang, to Terrence Collingsworth, and to Anya Doherty, also to co-founder Lise, who has really driven this forwards as well and done an incredible job. So, and to the audience, thank you everyone for joining in and for coming along and for your questions and engagement. You know, the great thing about it is that basically all I saw was support in the chat. It's quite hard to criticize this. So yeah, loving that. And please keep in touch with us if there's anything we can help each other out with in this respect. So, and that at exactly 20 past on the dot, we'll wrap up there. So enjoy the rest of the pre-summit if you're going to more events, and look forward to seeing you all very soon. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.